Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Every Rockie Ever, a Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, proud member of the Fans for Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmins, and joined always here with my older brother, Dustin.
Howdy ho.
Howdy ho, neighborino. Oakley dokley. As we, as always, celebrate Rockies history, talking all things individual Rockies throughout their history. And we've had quite a few episodes talk about multiple guys. But for this one, I think we wanted to settle in on one, maybe a more notable name, one that was worthy of an episode all for himself. And it is one of the best pitchers in Rockies history. Some would say an underrated best pitcher, an often forgotten one of how good he was in a Rockies uniform. And that is one Jorge De La Rosa out of Monterrey, Mexico. A longtime left-handed pitcher for the Rockies, had a solid career there. And so this should be a fun one to talk about, Dustin.
Oh, yeah. Good old Georgie is, I remember our good buddy, George Frazier, liked to say.
Mm-hmm.
He was, like you said, one of the most successful pitchers at Coors Field. That lefty, crafty lefty with a little hitch in his leg kick, and who was always readjusting the front side every pitch. But Jorge De La Rosa, man, he's a good one. Like you said, he's one of those guys that kind of everybody forgets about. When he's when we get into it, the stats don't lie. He is one of the best to toe the rubber for the Rockies.
And one of the most, probably, he might be the best trade acquisition pitching-wise that the Rockies have ever acquired, which is, when you think of their history of acquiring pitchers and trading and signing guys, that he's the best acquisition, from outside of the organization to bring in. No, it's pretty impressive and kind of sad, but more impressive.
Yeah, but one of the sneakiest, best moves they ever made, especially in that time period, right after the World Series appearance, and he locked up, part of that starting rotation for years.
And went through injuries and all that stuff that we'll get into. But we'll go ahead and, Dustin, give us the rundown on Jorge De La Rosa's career and time with the Rockies.
All right. Jorge Alberto De La Rosa, left-handed pitcher. He was born in 1981 in Monterrey, Mexico. And he, from that, he played ball. He was originally signed by the Arizona Diamondbacks in 1998 as an amateur free agent. He played down in Monterrey in the Mexican League, and bounced, or he was signed from them. The Diamondbacks drafted him. They signed him, right? And the team in Monterrey purchased him. Then the Red Sox purchased him from the Mexican League. Then he was traded over to the Diamondbacks. Then he was traded to the Brewers. And looking at the names that he was traded with, some big ones. There's a major league manager in one Craig Counsell, but then he was traded with from the Brewers over to the Royals, and then in 2008, he was traded from the Royals over to the Rockies for Ramon Ramirez. And he played with the Rockies, number 29, from that 2008 season to the 2016 season. And then he bounced back over to Arizona and finished out with the Chicago Cubs in 2018. In 2019, trying to make that comeback, re-signed with the Rockies, but an oblique injury shut it down, and he was released in June of 2019, and he's been retired since.
Hmm.
Jorge De La Rosa.
Yeah, that's a much longer career when you even look at it. 15 years in total. No, kind of in the big leagues. 9 years with Colorado. No, you looking at his career, he just doesn't seem like that guy that had been around for very long. But looking at that, from 2004 to 2018, he was in the big leagues, pitching around, getting action around the league. Which, again, one of those sneaky, just forgotten guys in baseball history.
Yeah, and as we dig into his history and stuff, he was a two-time Futures game player there in 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't that Jorge De La Rosa was just some no-name guy that, like, whatever. He had talent. He flashed it, but it just never turned into anything until he reached the altitude of Coors Field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because looking at his career ERA in Milwaukee, he had a 6.23 ERA in Milwaukee. In his career, had a 4.38 ERA with Arizona. And that was just that 1 year as a reliever in the big leagues. A 5.64 with the Royals for 2 years, and then a pretty good little stint with Chicago with a 1.29 in 17 games. Where those last 2 years he was strictly a reliever out of the bullpen. But you look leading up to that, just not that notable of a pitcher, just kind of the back end of rotation type of guy. Yeah, he'll go out there and just eat some innings for you. Toss out, hopefully you can stay in the game, but he's going to have that high ERA. But then, yeah, he gets traded after 2007 to the Rockies, and just something clicked, and he molded into the Rockies, into their cookie cutter mold we've talked about. He was that exact type of pitcher that they liked, and they were able to maximize whatever he was able to offer to them.
Yeah, and he was an opening day starter twice in that career. He did go through some injuries. He had a Tommy John thrown in there. Uh, I remember some other minor injuries that he lost some time, but he was a workhorse. And what's crazy to think is, looking back at it, how many strikeouts. He had the 12 strikeout game, the double digit strikeouts.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see that anymore. We haven't seen that for a few years. Even we think of Herman Marquez as a strikeout pitcher, but he's climbing up there if he comes back healthy and stays with it. But Jorge De La Rosa, it was just boom, that lefty. And the thing that we always talk about, what do you remember most about him? That changeup.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't one of these whirly woolly dooly ones. It was just like the fastball out of the hand, and it had just enough off of it that he had guys fishing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Jorge's that lefty. He's got that Rawlings glove, and he always had the tan Rawlings that looked like it was fresh out of the packaging, and go through that windup, lift that leg up, and he had that little bounce pause. Whoop, and
Mm-hmm.
here it came. He wasn't a flamethrower. He could get up 95, 90, mid 90s. He could throw that little loop and curveball in there every now and then, but that changeup. And I think that is where he found the success at Coors Field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Changing speeds and putting it down below.
yeah, in total in his career, he was a ground ball pitcher. That's what he was best known for, and averaged about a 43+% in Coors Field or with Colorado for ground balls. Throughout his career, he had a 46.3% ground ball rate, but in Colorado, it was 43%, 43%, 51% in 2010, 40%, 33 in 2012, but he was injured, so he wasn't around very much. And then 46%, 23 in 2013, 50% again, 14, 51%, 15, and 47.6% in 2016. So ground balls galore for Jorge De La Rosa, and kept his opponents off balance. That's what I always remember at that windup. Just the little hitch bounce in his lineup. He was a really slow pitcher. That was another thing. His pace wasn't very high. It wasn't very fast. When you look at two of the lefties the Rockies have today in Ty Block and Brent Suter, those guys are quick lefties. They work quick. But Jorge would take his time. But wearing the high pants, the high socks. But yeah, just a quick and efficient still, throw strikes. Because throughout his career, or in Colorado at least, averaged 7.8 strikeouts per nine, and then had a walk rate of 3.8 walks per nine. So he pounded the zone, got his strikeouts, limited his walks, and just got the ground balls when he needed to as well. So he's, again, wasn't the flamethrower, but he was crafty and could control his pitches and just had good movement of his arsenal and his weapons that he had in his toolbox.
Yeah, and he took advantage of that. He's got the stats. Yeah, he did have a little high in the walks, and that's where I remember Jorge. It seemed like when things in those bad outings that he had, it was like, oh man, and his emotions. Usually he's stone cold face, but you saw when things were going wrong that visible frustration of when things weren't going right. And I remember Jorge he seemed just like that competitor. And that's what I just remember listed like, well, he's getting into his own, he's getting worked up. And that 2008 when he came over from the Royals, and Jorge Torrealba, I think played a big role in maybe mentoring him, getting him on the battery mates. I think it's really important for those guys, the Latino pitchers, to have that catcher. Torrealba was. We'll get an episode of your Vite, and being on that same page. One, it's that language barrier that can exist, and you could see as I was watching clips. There's one where I don't know if it was Drew Goodman or Jeff Houston that said, your Vite, it went to 3-0, and your Vite got up, took his mask off, and had some words, and refocused him up, and boom, 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 and they get the guy out. So I think that played a huge role in maybe his development as a starting pitcher for the Rockies.
Yeah, it can just be that perfect storm where the pitcher just needs the right catcher, and at times when certain pitching coach can just help them at the right time. Because it was Bob Apodaca at that time, or whoever around that time. But you can just get the perfect storm where things just click at the right moment for the guy, where he works with him, he meshes with them so well, and that helps with the development. And Jorvit, I'm sure, was a lot of that. He had Miguel Olivo behind the dish for him, then Chris Iannetta working with him, and whoever else throughout those years, even Willeen Rosario, trying to run through other catchers that they've had. But you can get the right kind of guy with him, and that's what I always like. He was just kind of that bulldog still, was just passionate on the mound, wants to compete, and he'd get it done. When he was on, he was phenomenal. And it was just when those walks and maybe he started to get frustrated in his own head, constantly battling himself, I think was where he would get beat. But when he could get past that, man, it was fun to watch him pitch. He was he was that ace for so many years in that rotation where, all right, George is getting the ball. We're going to be okay today. We're going to have a chance to win this game.
And that was the thing when things were falling apart in the Walt Weiss era,
Uh-huh.
it was a disaster. George in a couple of those seasons, he was an anchor. It's like everything's falling apart. Jorge's gonna give him a chance.
Uh-huh. And looking at that, in 2008, first season, he wins 10 games for the Rockies. And actually, interesting thing on that I found is when he won those 10 games, he joined Aaron Cook and Ubaldo Jimenez with 10 plus wins. That was the first time since 2003 the Rockies had 3 starters with at least 10 wins in a season. The Rockies went 13-10 in his 23 starts that season. And in 2008, his 128 strikeouts were the third most by a left-handed pitcher in a single season in franchise history. So not too shabby in that first season with the Rockies. And then it continues on. He gets 16 wins the next season in 2009, which arguably between that and then a couple of the other years, 2009 is one of his best seasons in Rockies history that we can talk about for a little bit.
Oh yeah, that 2009 when things get shaken up and we put Jim Tracy in and everything clicked there that second half of the season for the Rockies, and Jorge was that ace. 16 wins for a Colorado Rockies starter. He 193 strikeouts in 185 innings. That's when you have more strikeouts than innings pitched. Man, you had things working. You were cooking. And that was the thing that year, that 2009. Man,
And it
have
was,
that kind of pitching.
yeah. He set career highs in every significant pitching category, ranked second among National League lefties in winning percentage, ninth in innings pitched, 12th in ERA, became just the third lefty in Rockies history to win at least 15 games. It was he's one of 3 pitchers in franchise history to log more than 10 win campaigns, and he was one of the first to do it in back-to-back, campaigns that season. Led the majors with 16 wins from June 5th through the end of the season. The first half of the season, he kind of struggled a bit. Wasn't crisp, but then after the All-Star break, or around that midsummer, even through past the All-Star break, he became one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Yeah, just the strikeouts that would come out, and a lot of people make as you're saying, he's the most of a left-handed pitch. I never even really thought of it that way. I just see him as he was the dog. He was that guy. I don't care what arm he threw with, but he was just on fire. Fire.
And then it makes you think, unfortunate that he suffered a groin injury right at the end of the season. And so you lose him for the playoffs, which then the Rockies go on and lose to the Phillies in the division series. But it kind of makes you play the what if game. Like, what if he had been healthy? What could have happened with that series? Could he have started one of those games and just locked it down and get themselves another win to keep it alive and force another game or something like that? But unfortunately, it didn't to be.
And we'll never know. But that was kind of it. Unfortunately, that was the start of kind of a habit of the injury bug. Because then in 2010, he is the opening day starter in the home opener, and makes 4 starts, and then there's a pulley tendon in his left middle finger. That's not a fun one to do it. So he ends up missing 67 games. when he was 3-1, the sub-4 ERA, and kind of had to grind out that the rest of the year, where it wasn't a perfect season, but it was still went 8-7, 21 innings, still racked up the strikeouts.
Mhm.
So, you know, even though he had that injury, that's still a good year. And you know, that's we go into the we go in that I remember that off season because it's like, well, he's a free agent. Is he going to go? Are they going to sign him? They need him. He's one of the guys. And it didn't take long, and they did re-sign him, which was
Mhm.
good.
Mhm. Yeah, it was just one of those things working out. Oh, what to do with him because you want to keep the guy around, and he's been successful. And maybe it was who knows what his market really looked like, but after all the success he had, it would have been easy for him to just pick somewhere else to go and try to continue that success. But I think one of those instances where he enjoyed pitching with the Rockies so much, enjoyed working with the organization. They obviously loved him and the success he was having. So they managed to work out an extension to keep him around for a couple years, one of a couple extensions that they sign him with to keep him around in purple for several more years after that 2009 2010 seasons. Unfortunately, that first year didn't work out too well because he only pitches in a few games, and then he has to undergo Tommy John surgery to work on that left elbow, and that kind of began for that. Just there's just that weird break in his Rockies career.
Yeah, and that 2012 season too, he makes a few starts, and that's always a trying time is after that Tommy John surgery, seeing if they're gonna be able to get back to that guy that he was before, right?
Mhm.
And luckily, 2013, it was he made it back to that, making 32 starts. Um, you know, making 30 starts in 2013. So it was like, yeah, we got our workhorse back, and he put together the, what I'll say is the best. Well, winning percentage wise, his best season as a Colorado Rocky, going 16-6 with a sub 4 ERA,
Mhm.
49. Holy cow! That was a year.
Yeah, it was one of those years, and he put up, career highs in starts, in strikeouts per nine, all that kinds of stuff. Just putting up that career year to kind of drag a team that wasn't very good. Had some good moments, good players on it, but it just wasn't going anywhere. But was just dragging that team along, going 16-6, 3.49 ERA, 162 and two thirds innings. So not as many innings as maybe you'd want, but he never pitched. He never really pitched over. He never pitched over 200 innings in a season. But who does anymore?
Yeah. Do you want to hear something that was absolutely mind-boggling right here? Let me hit you with this one. Coors Field in that 2013 season, 14 starts at Coors Field, De La Rosa went 10-1 with a 2.76 ERA.
Hmm.
Right? What?
Hmm.
That's unheard of.
Yeah.
That's holy cow.
Yeah, his ability to
Oh,
conquer Coors Field is one of the, I don't know if you want to call it the great enigmas, but why is it that Jorge De La Rosa had no problem pitching at Coors Field, and yet the team as a whole has really struggled there most of their in the entire history of the franchise?
I don't know that, and I think it is, it's especially maybe after the Tommy John, because in those following years, 2013, 14, and 15, 16, he goes in strikeouts 112, 139, 134, 108. He's uh, using that changeup more at Coors Field and change that. That's what I remember of Jorge was very good at working the up and down,
Mm-hmm.
down, up and down, and finding that success. It's so cool looking back at what he accomplished, because in 2014 he was once again Rockies opening day starter, um, and he tied a career high in 32 starts, and he got that nice extension, and he went on to win 14 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at that his career at Coors Field, I was looking up those numbers in we'll discount 2012, but in all of his seasons in Colorado pitching with the Rockies, he had an ERA under over 5 just 3 times in those 9 years with Colorado. And which is pretty sweet. 2000, like you mentioned, 2013, 2.76, 2014, a 308 ERA. Just he conquered Coors Field. Didn't get tagged with a lot of home runs. Only gave up not a whole lot, but just survived there. No problem. Just had no fear pitching at Coors. He needs to come back so they can impart his knowledge or wisdom to guys to figure it out.
Yeah, something that's what I always thought. Well, we thought some of these former all-stars to come back is in coaching positions or something, and that's what we've always thought is, why not try to get some of these former Rockies pitchers that had success back in with the club and mentoring or consulting with the pitching staff,
Mhm,
because we've had all-star pitchers. We have guys that conquered Coors Field, and what knowledge could they share? And I think Jorge would be a great one, especially like I said before with the Latinos, of getting on the same page and helping them out with the mental side of things, of how to you know how to deal with the altitude, how to deal when your ball doesn't move as much at Coors than it does on the road, and helping these guys that had the success. What kind of transitions did they make? What changes? What do they have to work on? And I think
mhm.
that's Jorge would be he he'd be on my list. I know they have Pedro Stasio working with the Dominican League, as an advisor and things, but this is one of the guys that I'm always advocating for.
Perfect guy to be like a pitching coach, either at the big league level or like down in AAA, where pitching's kind of a challenge there, pitching at the altitude there. Have someone like him be able to, if not a full time coach, just kind of being one of those again roving instructors to
Yeah,
come in and work with them and talk about the challenges of pitching, and figuring things out. Not necessarily to pitch like him, but to maybe take that mindset and approach to attacking hitters that he had.
for sure. And in that 2015 season is where we start seeing the record books open up for him. May 21st, 2015, he becomes the all-time strikeout leader for the Rockies. He passes Ubaldo Jimenez, and then on June 14th, 2015, he becomes the Rockies' all-time uh, winning pitcher,
Hmm.
uh, with in the record books, putting his stamp right in there.
Hmm. And speaking of where he ranks in history for the Rockies in career pitching, He is 5th all-time according to Baseball Reference. He's 5th all-time in pitching WAR with a 15.5. Earned run average, he's 4th all-time with a 4.35. He's 1st in wins with 86. Next closest is Aaron Cook with 72. Herman Marquez is 3rd with 65. So Herman maybe has a chance to overtake that one too. He is 2nd all-time in win-loss percentage. He is 5th in WHIP with a 1.381. Team to look down. Strikeouts per 9, he's 5th all-time, 7.767. Oddly enough, he doesn't rank in top 10 in games played. There's a lot of relievers on that, though.
Tons of relievers.
Innings pitched, he's 2nd all-time. We talked about Aaron Cook being a workhorse, who's at 1,312 in a third innings. De La Rosa is the next closest at 1,141 in a third innings. So Aaron Cook's got about 200 innings on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Herman Marquez, talking about current guys, at a 1,016. So he's closing in on that as well. First all-time with strikeouts, 985. The big story, Herman Marquez is just 2 behind him. So he's at least got it for now until the end of 2024. That's how long where he's got it.
Yeah, but Herman is another one that, that's I bet Jorge would be super proud of him going and taking those over for him.
He's 2nd all time in games started at 200, behind Aaron Cook at 206. He's just up there in so many of these. And then, he leads in some of the categories like walks. Some of the bad categories you don't want to lead in.
Probably wild pitches, too.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah, he does. 70 wild pitches to next closest is Herman Marquez at 55.
Yep.
So that might be when he's really rooting for Herman to take over.
Yeah.
He's 3rd all-time in hit by pitch with 48, behind Pedro Estacio and Jamie Wright.
Hey, that plate belongs to the pitcher, not the hitter.
He has faced the 2nd most batters in Rockies history at 4,911, behind Aaron Cook's 5,710. So he's right up there in all of these.
And if you want to get into some nitty-gritty stats, look at how well he did against left-handed hitters.
Which we can look up.
Yeah, you're the statmatician.
Yeah. So in his career in total, so this will include just throughout his entire career, not just with the Rockies, facing left-handed batters. Looking at him, left-handed batters had a 232 batting average against him, had a 308 on base, slugging 344. So he had 366 strikeouts, 146 walks against lefties, just 28 home runs surrendered to left-handed batters, as opposed to 150 to right-handers. Right-handed batters were slashing 270, 353, 446. They had an OPS of 799 against Jorge. Lefties had a 652 OPS. So he was just, again, one of those guys, left on left, could just dominate him, get that changeup down and away, get him to swing over it.
Well, I think he hid the ball very well with that really closed, and then it would come right on over. And he had a lot of success. And of course, after he left the Rockies, he was then put in with the Diamondbacks as a lefty reliever, lefty specialist. He did some work against the Rockies. We won't mention the one playoff wild card game thing, but that was a stat that maybe I didn't realize, but looking at the highlights, looking at the numbers, man, that's pretty. It's a big difference.
Mhm,
Lefties couldn't what was it 232, 236 batting average against,
mhm.
and that's another reason why he had so much success.
That, and we talk about how good he was at home. On the road, just as good, even better on the road. So he could be really good on the road and then take it at home and be pretty pretty decent and conquer Coors Field, where you get that nice balance and symmetrical kind of output from him, where it didn't matter whether he was at home or on the road. He was going to benefit from being on the road, but that wasn't going to tarnish what he was doing at Coors Field either. Because in Colorado during his on the road, 332 average in 2009 or ERA, 436 in 2010, 326 in 2011, 419 in 2013, had a 326 in 2015. So majority of his time in Colorado, just as good or better on the road as he was at Coors Field at home. He was an ace.
He was, and I miss him. I really do. And
Yeah,
I think if he he played with some he was in some staffs with with Elise Chassin and some of those Ubaldo Jimenez and Jeff Francis. These guys. He was with some really good pitchers, and I just think, what would it have been like if we had Herman Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Jorge De La Rosa, Antonio Senzatella, those guys, that group right there. Phew, man,
mhm,
and a healthy Jeff Francis
mhm,
or an Ubaldo Jimenez that never got traded and didn't get disgruntled.
mhm,
Man, of course, now we're talking about putting together our fantasy teams from the histories, but
mhm,
I'm getting generations mixed
mhm.
together, but
Yeah, but it's cool because Jorge kind of was part of that bridging of that gap where he left, and then it just kind of opened the door to the current staples that we have now. If they weren't injured at time of recording,
yep.
but of a Kyle Freeland, Senzatella, Marquez, John Gray when he was here. But Jorge was in some of those big rotations, big names. When we look at the roster boards and like the leaderboards, who's up there? It's Ubaldo, it's Jeff Francis, it's Aaron Cook, and then who's there now? Who's really stood the test of time and really rose above them all was Jorge De La Rosa. Which you think of the history of Rocky starting pitchers, and then like the greats, the best of the best. I don't think Jorge De La Rosa gets remembered as much as an Ubaldo or some of these other guys. He just kind of flied under the radar and became great.
But in my book, he's there, and
Hmm.
that's what matters.
Yeah, the Jorge De La Rosa, one heck of a career, and one of the best Rockies pitchers in history. And oh, where would you rank him on that pantheon of pitchers? If you're having to build that Mount Rushmore of pitchers, where is he making it on there? Where does he rank?
I want to say he's in the top five. It popped up. He's number three for me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, he's. I think. I think just because of the workhorse that he was, Aaron Cook is number one for me. Number two is Ubaldo. He was the only no hitter. He was the flashy boom. This is our guy, the all star. Was on fire, and then Jorge right after that, and then got to give Jeff Francis some love because the guys that are still there now, the Herman and Kyle Freeland, they might make some moves in my Mount Rushmore of Colorado Rockies pitchers, but I gotta give Jorge all the love that I can
Uh-huh.
because he is one that I really did always appreciate. I hated to see him go, and I hate when that happens when injuries and just the time, the
Uh-huh.
age, and they go on. I felt the same way with Jamie Wright when he left, and when I saw him playing with other teams, I always wanted them as individuals to do good.
Uh-huh.
They always did good against the Rockies,
Uh,
but still, um, you know, that's what that's what I feel for him. And I think he's from what we've seen, he's living in Arizona. They have twin boys that are about my boy's age. They're a month older than my boy, and I bet he's super busy, living life with them and doing his thing.
uh-huh. And I think he ranks he's let's see here. Well, he's in the top 24 players of all time for the Rockies. I can't quite pull up where he's at on that rank, but he's definitely in the lower half, but he's in that top 20 at least, or he's even in that top 15 all time in terms of WAR and everything. And a lot of that's thanks to whatever offensive numbers he was able to contribute in his career, which we haven't talked about the hitting aspect for a lot of these guys.
Oof.
But just in case we're wondering, with the Rockies, he had a 133 batting average, 149 on base, 144 slugging, a whopping 149 strikeouts to 6 walks, had 48 hits, 4 doubles, and 27 RBIs. In terms of bunts, he had 28 sack bunts and stuff. So he was definitely a pitcher.
Indeed, I can very much relate.
When he added a whopping negative 1.4 BWAR offensively. So majority of his efforts of his value came from pitching.
Indeed.
As is the case with most of those pitchers, except for Tyler Chatwood, who ranks in the top 24 because of his hitting and puts him over John Gray, despite John Gray being a better pitcher, arguably. Fun stuff. But yeah, overall, Jorge De La Rosa, I think just the forgotten ace kind of seems like just his whole vibe. Just quiet, did his thing, was successful, maybe kind of gets overlooked, forgotten. But when you remember Jorge, you're like, oh yeah, that guy was good. He was a good Rockies pitcher for his
Oh, and
career.
my last thing, he made those Rockies uniforms look good.
Mm,
I don't know, going through his stats, he just looked, burly chest with the vests, with
mhm.
the purple jerseys that, like in the footage they almost looked almost bluish, that bluish purple,
Yeah,
not the real like I don't know what shade
it was
it
their
is, but
darker shade of purple before they
yeah,
changed it to a lighter one.
yeah, but and I always remember the black vests or the road grays, those solid road grays,
Or the
and
white
the high.
vests.
Oh yeah, the white vests. I always picture cargo in that one, but
Mhm.
the high socks and
Yeah,
that's Jorge.
I think the black vests were Jorge's kind of favorite one too. It seemed like every time he pitched, that's what they were wearing for the most part. Yeah, it's those little things that we remember. Well, I think that brings it to a close here for Jorge De La Rosa here on Every Rocky Ever, one of our favorites. And I'm sure plenty of those listening have their memories too and things you loved about Jorge, or George of the Rose, as we called him.
George of the Rose or hip hip Jorge.
Mm-hmm. Or Georgie. Yeah, it's one of those solid, good pitchers in team history, and it was great that they were able to have him come to Coors Field for the 30th anniversary celebration. One of these, they had him come one of those weekends. I think it was like when Ubaldo came. They kind of brought
Yeah.
two of them together, and yeah, just good that they still have that connection with him. And it's one of those guys we'd love to see more of. Like a lot of these guys, love to see him come back, be celebrated more. If the Rockies ever create their own team Hall of Fame, he's in there for me. He is in that Hall of Fame. Would he be part of the inaugural class? Well, I'd make it a huge inaugural class, but he would eventually get in. But well, that'll do it
good to
here.
me.
That'll do it here for this edition of Every Rockie Ever. As always, we appreciate you tuning in and following along with us. Be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast feeds. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube. You can also be sure to rate and review the episodes, especially over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. 5-star rating really helps the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, gets that more coverage, helps make the show better. You can find us on Twitter as well at Every Rockie Ever. I guess it's called X now, whatever it's called. And you can find me at sideline_crowd, as well as Dustin at Mr. T Spanish. And you can find us at Rocky, ROCKY, MTN Rooftop over on Twitter X as well. Any last words, Dustin?
Now, as the 2023 MLB season's wrapping up because the Rockies aren't moving on, we'll be putting together some more combinations of players we want to cover and get your opinions out there. Who do you want to talk about? Who's made impacts in your lives? Who are those most memorable, forgotten Rockies?
Mm-hmm. We'll see you next time here on Every Rockie Ever. I'm Skyler. That's Dustin. We'll see you next time.
So long. Farewell.
Adios.